On December 19th, 2006, a 22-year-old forward suited up in his first career NHL game for the St. Louis Blues, taken in the second round of the 2003 NHL entry draft. That player was none other than David Backes, and he would finish the night with his first NHL point, an assist on a goal scored by Doug Weight. Little did he know that would be the first of 727 games Backes would play as a Blue, in a career where Backes would not only don the C on his jersey as the 21st captain of the St. Louis Blues, but finish in the top 10 in goals and points as a Blue, putting him in the same company as some of the greatest players to ever wear the blue note. While Backes would eventually leave the team in the summer of 2016, signing a 5-year contract with the Boston Bruins, his peak and long-lasting impact will always be in St. Louis, where those 10 years between 2006 and 2016 showcase the kind of player David Backes was. Starting with the offensive side, Backes was no stranger to lighting the lamp. In his time as a Blue, he scored 206 goals, firmly putting him in first place compared to his peers who played in the same time span. To date, Backes is one of only 8 players in Blues history to score 200 plus goals as a Blue, putting him in the company of guys like Keith Tkachuk and the late Pavel Demitra. That Backes crossed the illustrious 200 goal plateau is in large part due to how good of a finisher he was. Here we can break finishing down into 2 main metrics, basic shooting percentage and the more advanced goals scored above expected. We'll begin with the former. By the end of his tenure, Backes had accumulated a shooting percentage of 12.5%. For comparison, the league average forward between 2006 and 2016 had a shooting percentage of just 10.72%. So just at a glance, Backes was an above average finisher compared to all of the forwards who played during his time. However, if you look back at the 395 forwards who had at least 500 plus shots between 2006 and 2016, we see that the distribution of shooting percentage is approximately normal, and we can therefore use z-scores to get a value corresponding to how many forwards Backes' shooting percentage was better than or equal to. After normalizing the data, Backes' z-score of 0.60 tells us that David Backes had a shooting percentage better than or equal to 72.6% of NHL forwards with at least 500 shots. To have a higher shooting percentage than nearly 3/4 of all qualifying NHL forwards is very good, as that is difficult territory to reach. Nearly 1,500 forwards played at least one game in the NHL between the beginning of the 2005-06 season and the end of the 2015-16 season. Only 395 of them made it to 500 plus shots. For the vast majority of forwards, they just fizzle out and never make it that far. And even if you do make it to 500 plus shots, there's no guarantee you'll even be average. To put it bluntly, the NHL is hard. You have to be really good to not only stick around for as long as Backes did, but you have to be even better to be among the best of the best that the game has to offer. We can now go a step further and view finishing through the lens of goals scored above expected. Unlike shooting percentage, goals scored above expected takes shot quality into account, which allows us to determine a baseline amount of goals a player should score given the quality of the shots they're taking, and then we compare that value to the observed value to see if the player is scoring above, below, or as expected. In the case of David Backes, he finished his tenure as a Blue with 19.62 goals scored above expected, which puts him in the 95th percentile among NHL forwards and in the company of Jeff Carter and Max Pacioretty. Suffice to say, that is also really good, but is perhaps even more impressive considering how resilient Backes was. He would have a season where his goals scored would be below expected, but he would almost immediately rebound the following season. For example, 2012-13 was the worst season of his career from a goal-scoring perspective, as he had just 6 goals despite having been expected to score 11.12 goals, resulting in a goal scored above expected of -5.12. The very next year, Backes scored 27 goals with an expected goals total of 17.57, giving him a goal scored above expected of 9.43. In layman's terms, this was a 14.5 point shift year over year. It was such a large swing, it was the second highest year over year change in goals scored above expected over those seasons, only behind his own teammate Alexander Steen. So, to tie everything together, Backes was still in the 95th percentile of NHL forwards when it came to goals scored above expected, even though he had down years that reduced his accumulated total, because his rebound seasons always made up for them. Backes wasn't superhuman. He wasn't a player where every single season was his best season, but what he had going for him was that he almost never had 2 bad seasons in a row, and we ultimately see that in the form of Backes having 6 seasons with a positive goal scored above expected as a Blue, compared to just 4 seasons with a negative goal scored above expected. Moving away from goal scoring, our focus shifts onto Backes' on-ice impact. First and foremost, Backes played a very physical game. During his time as a Blue, no other Blues player even came close to challenging him when it came to laying the body. Backes had almost twice as many hits as second place Ryan Reeves, and the gap between Backes and Reeves was the same as the gap between Reeves and 72nd place Christian Backman. Around the league, league, Backus's 2,138 hits was the 5th most among all players, and he was one of just 7 players to tally over 2,000 hits, landing him in the same group as guys like Matt Martin and Chris Neal. When you look at stats like that, it makes his 727 games played as a Blue even more impressive. Think of all of the wear and tear that comes with regularly playing hockey over a 10-year span, and then add on top of that a heavy mix of physicality night after night. How many players could realistically play the way David Backes did, keep it up over a decade, and at the same time play in roughly 96% of their team's games? The answer is maybe a handful of players, and in that handful is David Backes. Defensively, Backes' best work came in the 4-year stretch where he finished top 5 in Selke voting 4 years in a row, with his highest position being second in the 2011-12 season behind Patrice Bergeron. Nevertheless, I'd argue that his best defensive season was actually a tie between the 2013 shortened season and the 2013-14 season, as those two seasons were the only ones in this stretch of time where Backes was above the 80th percentile in all 4 5-on-5 categories of Corsi against, shots against, expected goals against, and high danger chances against. For example, in 2013, the average 5-on-5 shots against per 60 was roughly 28.5. That means with an average forward on the ice that season, teams usually got roughly 28.5 shots on net per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 play. With David Backes on the ice that season, teams only averaged about 22.75 shots against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 play. That's over 6 shots against that didn't happen because Backes was on the ice. That said, it was a shortened season, and the following season increased the sample size of games back to the normal 82-game season. That Backes' stats stayed largely the same even as the schedule went back to normal shows that the shortened season results weren't a fluke. While teams could expect to score 2.22 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes with an average forward on the ice in the 2013-14 season, the Blues were only expected to allow 1.89 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes with Backes on the ice. Backes wasn't just a player who could hit you and score on you. At his peak, he could also play defense as good as any other. It should really come as no surprise that Backes' best seasons by 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage, a stat that measures how often a team is expected to outscore their opponent while a particular player is on the ice, came during this 4-year stretch where his defense was extraordinary. By expected goals for percentage, 2013-14 was his best season as a Blue, and while it isn't 31 goals or 62 points, 56.03% is important in its own right. It's the culmination of his unquestionable offensive ability mixed with a defensive boost that, while temporary, mixed to become something special, if even for a moment. David Backes was a great Blue, and the legacy he left behind is overwhelmingly positive. While his time as a Blue didn't end with the Stanley Cup, he helped set the table for those after him, those who would finally bring St. Louis their first ever Stanley Cup.